Star Wars has a new show that just released called Acolyte, and a lot of people are saying that this is the worst Star Wars show ever produced. Which I have to raise a big eyebrow to because did we all forget Book of Boba Fett exists? What blows my mind is some people still defend that show, saying like, oh, the last 2 episodes are good, but I mean, let's just go ahead and forget about the other episodes before it. Like the Vespa chase scene. God help us all. I'd show you the clip if I wasn't worried about being copyright struck for it, but there is an unironic chase scene in Star Wars Book of Boba Fett where they are pursuing each other on Vespas that probably go about as fast as I can jog. And I am not fast at jogging. If you've seen me do the presidential fitness course, you'll know my top speed is that of maybe a child falling down the stairs, like a very small flight of stairs. I am not fast, but I am confident I could have outrun the Vespas in Star Wars. Point is, recently, Star Wars has just been a shell of its former self, which sucks to see because it's a franchise that meant so much to me growing up and meant so much to me for such a long time, but I just have not enjoyed it in a while. The only things in the Star Wars universe I've enjoyed in recent times were the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, the entirety of Andor. Andor was shockingly good, and also I liked the Han Solo movie. That's a really controversial hot take, but that's just a genuinely turn-your-brain-off fun sci-fi film if you forget that it's supposed to tie into Star Wars in any way. It's self-aware cheesiness, and I just had a good time watching it. And I can't say that about pretty much anything else Star Wars has done for the last decade. And for the most part, I stopped tuning in. I swore off the franchise because I just haven't been enjoying it, so what's the point in just banging my head against this wall in boredom? But with the headline of Acolyte being the worst Star Wars thing ever made, I had to check it out. When people say French fry, I pizza, you know what I mean? Like, if something is said to be truly horrific, avoid at all costs, I'm going right over there and I'm taking a big old fucking sniff of it. I've got to know, does the shit smell like poop? Time to find out. I'd like to form my own opinions on it. So, I watched the first 3 episodes of Acolyte, which are the only 3 episodes that are out, and I want to vomit my thoughts into your mouth like a baby bird being fed by its mother here. We're going to go over the good and the bad, and there's not much good. Let's start with the good, actually, because that'll be nice and quick. I actually really like the action. The action in this is mainly hand-to-hand combat, and they do a pretty good job with it. Also, just a heads up, my house isn't haunted. That's not a poltergeist event. That claw machine is almost ready, so right now it seems the engineers are tinkering around with it remotely. So, I mean, it's pretty cute. Sorry, I wanted to see if they won. So they're using the Force remotely to play my fucking claw machine behind me. Don't be distracted. Point is, the fights. I actually liked the fights. It's flashy, hand-to-hand combat and martial arts, and that's nice. There's not a lot of it, but when it's there, it's at least refreshing. It's this welcomed palate cleanser from the very terrible writing that the show has. Like, I don't even think the characters are even bad per se. Like, they could have been pretty interesting, but the writing is so cringe. And I know I use that word real loosey-goosey. I mainly use it ironically, but here I really do mean it. It sounds like they're trying to be deep, but don't know how. For example, one of the bad guys, he's like, "Steel and laser no good against Jedi. Have to kill the dream." And then fucking fires up his lightsaber for no reason, all to be like really cinematic and dramatic. It's just really lame. Like, all of the writing falls super flat. Even when you have characters I think could work pretty well, they just can't write them well, unfortunately. So the show starts with who we think is the main character killing a Jedi Master in a bar fight. And the bar fight's really cool if you don't think about it too hard. She's supposed to be all about peace, but she waits until after all of her friends get their shit pushed in, absolutely clobbered by this assassin who came up to her, letting her know her intentions, like, I am here because I want to kill you. Like, I am here because I am going to fucking murder everyone here to kill you. And the Jedi Master just kind of blows her off like, whatever, punk, loser, get out of this bar. So then she starts killing, or not killing, she starts, annihilating all of her friends, and then after they're all down is when she steps up, and that just doesn't make much sense. Like, why? Like, I feel like as a Jedi you'd probably act before then to protect your friends, and then she eventually dies to the assassin because the assassin throws a knife at the bartender, and the Jedi Master force stops it, and then she takes a knife in the heart while she was distracted for stopping it. So she acted to protect the bartender far more than she acted to protect any of the friends she was with, and it led to her death. She died to basically a small fucking kitchen knife blade. Of course, it's very sharp. It's a real weapon, but I mean, it's a Jedi Master. You don't typically expect them to die to something like that. That was pretty underwhelming. But the fight itself was flashy and cool, but when you really start to break apart like why it was happening and the way in which the Jedi died here, kind of silly. Now, after the Jedi Master's death, they figure out who the most likely culprit is behind the assassination. It's our main character, Osha, who is a former Jedi. Well, she was trained as a Jedi and left 6 years ago. Now she works as basically a ship repair person. Like, she does a lot of, like, maintenance on ships, and the Jedi come up to her, they accuse her of the crime. The bartender even identifies her, and it turns out she's innocent. Osha had a twin sister named May. And 16 years ago, or 15 years ago, I forget exactly the timeline, there was this big fire where only Osha survived. Everyone thought May died. And by everyone, I mean Osha and Jedi Master Sol, who was there and took Osha as his Padawan. He thought May was dead, watched her die, but it turns out May's alive and she's out for revenge on 4 Jedi in particular. So now she's just on a galactic killing spree. Now, initially, when the premise was starting to unfold here, I thought this was going to be like Osha's going to have to go on her own solo mission to prove that it's not her killing the Jedi, it's actually her twin sister who is alive. But nope, the Jedi immediately learn that May is real and actually even get her caught in a sting operation in the 2nd episode, immediately. She goes to this Jedi, Master Torben, I believe his name was, who just sits there meditating with like a force field around him. So she's trying to assassinate him, but he's blocking all of her punches by falling asleep while floating, basically. And she's really struggling to hit him. And then she eventually works with someone else in the city, and the Jedi catch her from that. The guy gives her a poison to kill Master Torben with, and she basically goes up to him and is like, listen, Master Torben, I know you're really guilty, which is why you just sit here fucking floating on your ass all day. Like, I get it. I'm giving you an option to kill yourself. And then he just floats down, he's like, thank God. I've been looking to die. Takes the poison and dies. He's like, forgive me for my sins. Dead. Dude couldn't wait to be banished to the Shadow Realm here. Basically, the implication is that he is guilty of some kind of cover-up with their past of that event that separated Osha and May and led to everyone thinking May and everyone else around there was dead. Osha's whole family and everyone around her was killed in a fire, and they thought May was dead as well, but it turns out she's not. Torben had a suspicion that May survived. Somehow, I guess we'll learn later on why he was under that impression. So he just sat in like a suspended animation state, floating like Zenyatta, waiting for the moment where she would bring him a poison so he could take it and die. But if I may issue an argument for anything else besides that, if he was waiting for May to kill him as like a way for him to apologize and give her closure, why wouldn't he just let down the force field when she was trying to punch, kick, and stab him? Why keep it up? Just to prank her? Like, what's the point? Why did he wait for a poison when he could have just let her stab him? I don't know. It seems silly. Maybe he fell asleep at that point and didn't realize it's possible. I don't know. But it's dumb. It's still like really dumb. Like, there's nothing satisfying or entertaining about that. It's just really silly. But anyway, after her death, they eventually corner May. They catch her. They're about to bring her in, and it leads to a pretty good fight yet again between May and Master Sol. Like, I do like the combat. Like, they do a good job with that. Honestly, that should have been, like, the whole focus of this series, because it's the only thing they're doing right here. Also, I forgot to mention this. Coruscant plays somewhat of a big role as a location here, kind of. And they show you Coruscant, and I was so disappointed. It's crazy how fucking over 20 years after the prequels have come out, the prequels had a better, like, visualization of Coruscant than this show. This show has over $100 million of budget to play with, and somehow they just cannot make Coruscant look nearly as good as it did 20 years ago. That's so disappointing. It's my favorite location in all of Star Wars lore, and when I saw it here, it actually looked like they just kept copy and pasting the same building in the background when they did their wide shot, and put no actual care into showcasing how grand this place is. It's just... That just really kind of speaks to the quality at which they're satisfied with pumping out the Star Wars shows now. Like, it's so... I have to imagine the VFX artists weren't super proud of it. It just seems like it's pumped out just to get it out immediately for more Star Wars slop. It just feels like they don't put a ton of care into the property. It's just a matter of putting as much property out as possible. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if... honestly, I'd be happier if we got a Darth Insanius solo show. Or a Darth Yucky show. Or even, I mean, fuck it, Glup Shido. Give me the Glup Shido Grand Adventure. Like, I don't care, but just anything where they'll put any effort into it. Because they have the ability to do cool shit in Star Wars. They showed it with Andor. They showed it with the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. But they just got too much dip on their chip, I think, and now they're just totally complacent, pumping things like this out. And it's not very good. Now, I'll go ahead and spoil this. I don't think it's the worst Star Wars show. I still think that belongs to Book of Boba Fett. But it's still not good. Like, it's still just very not good. The only thing good in it is the fighting so far. And I don't really know how the show can save itself because it's kind of backed into a corner. So episode 3 is the one that everyone's up in arms about. Like, this is the one that put it on my map is like, okay, maybe I should watch this because everyone's mad about how bad this show is after watching episode 3. So... let's talk about episode 3. Episode 3 gives the background of Osha and May, the Force-sensitive twins who this whole show revolves around. May is the villain, Osha is the hero who's trying to figure everything out, like why is May doing this, how did May survive, who's really behind it all, and Osha's working with all the Jedi to figure it all out and piece everything together. And I imagine it's going to get into a cover-up with the Jedi having something to do with this big fire, but I'll get to that in a moment. So episode 3 shows where they come from. They come from a coven of witches. And Osha and May were created somehow. And it's like a big secret among the witches, their creation. So there's these 2 Force-sensitive witches born into this coven, and it's a huge deal, obviously. These twins were conceived without a father, and it's a very big moment in the Star Wars universe that the Jedi also become aware of. And if you know anything about Star Wars lore, you'll recognize that this is very similar to Anakin Skywalker, the actual prophesized child in Star Wars lore. He was conceived by Shmi, who had him without a father. So, like, this big Force-sensitive conception is a really huge deal in the Star Wars universe, I would think. So, the Coven of Witches are about to put them through this thing called the Ascension ceremony. Actually, before I get to the Ascension, it's important I talk a little bit more about the Coven itself. So, the Coven kind of have a different idea of what the Force is. They speak about the Force as a thread, and they try and drop like some profound lines about it, saying that this isn't about good and bad, it's about who is allowed to use it, referring to the Force and like the Jedi being there about it. And then they also say that the Force isn't a weapon, but then when she says that, this is the girl's mother saying this, the twins' mother. She's the leader of the Coven. She says, you know, the Force, the thread, isn't meant to be a weapon. And then in order to demonstrate this, she immediately uses it as a weapon. She has one of the other Coven members come up to block her Force thread. And she is unsuccessful in doing so, so she gets blasted back. Then she has 2 come up to combine their Force to block her, and it's successful. But you're still using it as a weapon, even though you just said that you weren't going to. And then, a few scenes later, one of the other scenes, they directly use the Force as a weapon, taking control of Master Torben while he was young in this scene, like, threatening him with it. They literally, like, take over his mind, like, actually fucking brainwash him, his eyes, like, roll into the back of his skull and go pitch black, and they use it as, like, a threat. So, like, they are clearly using it as a weapon, yet preaching that it's not supposed to be one, so it's very conflicting there. But anyway, let's go back to the Ascension. The Jedi have been made aware of these 2 twins. The Ascension starts. And this is probably a clip a lot of you have seen floating around because it's very close to being as embarrassing as the Vespa chase scene from Boba Fett. They're doing a chant. while the twins are up there during the ascension, and it's the power of one, the power of two, the power of many, in like Hadoken blasting force towards the Coven leader, who is the girl's mother, and then she blasts that force into like the head of the children. Well, only May, actually, because it gets interrupted before Osha, and she's like blasting all of that into May, and then she ascends. And I really think that chant showcases how little effort was put into pretty much anything in this show. Like, I don't know why someone wouldn't speak up and be like, hey, let's put a little bit more thought behind this very important chant. Like, this is a huge ceremony for characters that have massive, like, I guess, implications on the entire Star Wars universe, because they were conceived without a father in the same way that Anakin was, and they're extremely Force-sensitive, extremely important characters. Like, maybe we should do a little bit more with this chant that's supposed to be their ascension ceremony. Like, the power of one, the power of two, the power of many. That's horrible. That's like the first thing someone would put on, like, a whiteboard before, like, actually fleshing it out into what the real chant would be. That's, like, the alpha of it. Like, that's not what you should have ever ran with. Like, that's some shit you stick up on a mood board just to get the point across of what the chant needs to convey. That this is a power for everybody and we need to channel it, kind of thing. But anyway, the ceremony gets broken up by the Jedi, and they're trying to recruit these two Force-sensitive twins because the Jedi are recruiting anyone that could be a good candidate to become a Jedi. Osha wants to become a Jedi, even though it means leaving her entire way of life forever. May hates the idea. So they take the tests, and they were initially instructed to fail because the Coven of Witches doesn't want to lose them either, and obviously the mother doesn't want to lose her children. But Osha passes the test. She decides she doesn't want to fail. She wants to be a Jedi, and the mother accepts that. She's like, okay, you know what, it's what you want to do. We're just going to have a conversation with the rest of the Coven soon. And then May and Osha get into a heated argument because May doesn't want Osha to leave. So they're arguing in their room, and May's like, I'm not going to let you leave. And Osha's like, well, you can't stop me. It's what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. And May's like, no, I will stop you. I'm going to kill you. She says that. She says, I'm going to stop you by killing you. So she traps Osha in that room and then lights a book on fire and then drops the book in front of the door, and all of a sudden this entire fucking place just goes up in flames instantly. It's like the whole place was made out of nitroglycerin. And I think it's important that we note where they're located. This is a very secret society that's located in a very, very, very large stone structure that is clearly a technologically advanced stone structure of the future. Everything is made out of fucking stone. And yet, when she drops that piece of paper, that fire paper, everything explodes into fire, flames instantly. So Osha panics. She eventually gets out of the room, only to find that everything's being engulfed in this blazing inferno. And then she goes into like the main area. She sees her mother, and everyone there is dead somehow. And actually, before that, Osha and May see each other on two sides of this bridge that's broken in half and collapsing, and the bridge gives out, and Osha and May are falling to their death, but Master Soul saves Osha, and they both assume May has perished from that fall. That's when they go into the next room and see all of these bodies, and I imagine this is where the cover-up's going to come in, that the Jedi must have done something to kill all of the witches or whatever, and May is aware of that, which is why she's going to kill all of the other Jedi. At least I hope that's the direction they go, because there is no way that May killed everybody there, and there is no way this fire spread that rapidly and killed everybody. There is just no fucking way that that's going to be what actually happened. I think that's impossible. I don't think they would do that because it's so nonsensical. But even the idea that the Jedi just slaughtered all of the witches is also a bit out there, because they didn't need to either. Osha was going to go with them, and she made that clear to the Jedi. So they really didn't stand to gain anything from killing all of the witches either. Unless they really just hated that May didn't want to go with them. But even then, I still feel like that's not a measure the Jedi would take, per se. But the show really does want to make you see the Jedi as being evil, so maybe they would go that far. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But even setting aside the mystery of that, I still think from like the actual core concept of this betrayal from May and this, Breaking Bad going to the dark side is really, really dumb. I'm not letting you leave, Osha. So I'm going to kill you and basically burn this whole place down. That way you can't leave. Gotcha. Like, they did try and set up May as being psychotic in an earlier scene, but not to this degree. They also showcased how much she loves her sister, and I still feel like under no circumstances would you just snap and be like, okay, well, the only way to stop her from leaving is to murder her. That'll be satisfying. Like, then I'll be happy. That'll fix things. Like, it's just really, that's just not, that doesn't make any sense. Like, maybe there's more to it that we'll learn down the line, but that was pretty clear. There wasn't a whole lot of, like, you know, mystery there. She instantly goes from, I'm not letting you leave, I'm gonna kill you, to setting that place on fire. Like, she says that point blank. So I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room for something deeper there. That's still just really stupid. But anyway, we're 3 episodes deep into the show. It's not good. Like, it's definitely not good, but I still don't think it's the worst from Star Wars, because at least the action scenes in here are enjoyable. I can't say the same for Book of Boba Fett. So Book of Boba Fett's still taking that big L as the worst Star Wars show in my opinion. But there's still plenty of episodes left of Acolyte to go. I guess it could get worse. But anyway, I wanted to talk about it because it's being talked about a lot as one of the worst Star Wars shows, and I just had to question it and see for myself if that's true. I disagree to a certain extent. It's not the worst, but it's definitely not good. That's really about it. See ya.